Welcome to the cocknbols opening, as played by Paul Charles Morphy in 1857 at the First American Chess Congress against Alexander Beaufort Meek. Now, the difference between Morphy's cocknbols and my cocknbols is that it follows a different move order. In fact, no two cocks are the same, so where his lacks in girth, it makes up for in attacking prowess, whereas ours maintains the girth and the attacking prowess. However, guys, this was 170 years ago, so they hadn't quite developed the chess knowledge that we have now. Now, it starts off with e4, e6, the French defense. The thing about Morphy is that he was actually fluent in French, German, and Spanish, so he knew exactly what to respond with when he saw the French, and that was d4, creating the tip of his shaft. Now, Meek didn't play d5 like we would in the modern cocknbols. He plays g6, preparing to put the bishop along the long black diagonal. Morphy knows this, doesn't care. Bishop to d3, further developing the shaft. After bishop g7 as expected, Morphy plays bishop to e3, developing pretty much half of the shaft at this point, and preparing to put these knights on e2 and d2. So after a knight to e7, allowing this for some reason, knight comes to e2, and after pawn to b6, preparing to put the bishop along the other long black diagonal, knight to d2, developing a full cock. As you can see, black's pieces aren't quite in the game as much as white pieces are. So this is more of a lesson on chess principles, which was the whole hype back in the day. These days, we know better, and that is that we need to get our cock and our balls out in the game as soon as they're possible. Anyways, after bishop to b7, as expected, Morphy castles, creating his first ball. Now, the thing about this cocknbols is that, actually, it doesn't get a second ball. It maintains simply one ball for the rest of the game. Now, I suppose this could be due to inflation, because one ball back then, same as two balls now. You guys all have felt the, cost of living crisis these days. Could be for other reasons, but could be a secret of Morphy's. But, for now, let's just assume that there was a good reason for not playing rook to c1 and creating a full cocknbols. And as you can see, in the modern cocknbols, we have a queen on b3 pretty much at this point in the game. However, not to linger on that for too long, Meek simply plays d5, now attacking the tip of our shaft, probably seeing that there's something nefarious going on here, probably doesn't want to allow any rook to c1 in the future. And now Morphy plays the courageous move, pawn to e5, extending the tip of his shaft and blocking in this bishop's diagonal. However, as you can see there, now this girth has been a bit compromised and there aren't any pawns to support this push and there's no pieces here. So e5 does extend the tip of the shaft, maybe weakens the light square girth. Anyway, so after castles, now if you look at the position, the bishops are well placed. The knight can come into the attack this way, and move on to there. Maybe after this knight moves somewhere, the queen can jump into the attack. So after f4, preparing potentially to break open the f-file, start putting pieces in the attack, maybe play g4 and to just pile up on this king with any means necessary. Meek plays f5. And if you've all noticed, this f-pawn went past the e5 pawn. And as you all know, this is a forced move to take on passant in the modern world, but I suppose back then that wasn't written into the chess rules. So Morphy ignored this, played pawn to h3, preparing to put the bishop on h2. At this point, Meek plays knight to d7, developing the knight finally. But if you look at the position, the bishops are locked in to these diagonals. Obviously, this bishop can now not come to e6, a6 at all. Even though the principles of chess were the whole hype back then, it seems like Meek didn't do his homework because these bishops are pretty much useless. And the knights as well, they're not doing too great. Like, where's this knight going to go? Are you going to go here? No one wants you there. Morphy obviously sees this and just starts piling up on the attack. So after king h2, a prophylactic king move is the precursor to the finest of attacks. Black knows this, is going to go into defensive mode with c5, striking in the center, trying to disrupt the final remnant of this tip. After c3, defending the tip, simply pawn to c4, attacking the bishop. Now bishop comes back to c2 and maintains this eye on the king, which, if the position opens up, this is going to be crucial, but we'll get to that in just a moment. After pawn to a6, for some weird reason, probably preparing to put the pawn on b5 and knight on b6. As I said, didn't follow any principles, wasn't following the meta at the time. Knight to f3, simply jumping into the attack, preparing to maybe jump to here and attack this pawn. Meek has to defend it some way. He plays h6, stopping the knight from jumping into the attack, but after g4, attacking this pawn, soon this pawn will become way too weak to defend after the knight comes to h4 and the bishop attacks. So after king to h7, simply rook to g1, and now eyeing up this pawn even more. So after rook to g8, possibly a copycat move, maybe to put the bishop on g8, move the knight to here, and then maybe occupy this, by the way, useless diagonal because the bishop can't come to any of these squares. But maybe it was for other reasons that I personally can't see right now. Queen to e1, once again preparing to put a piece on the king side. After knight to c6, defending the h4 square from the queen from coming in, and also developing the knight to a position where it still is quite useless because it can't really come to any of these squares. Knight to h4. Now instead of putting the queen on h4, knight to h4 makes so much sense. Now look at this bishop. It's x-raying the king. Meek has once again failed to follow basic chess principles and put his king on the x-ray of a bishop. If you're watching this and you're new to chess, never do that. Doesn't matter what piece it is, it's gonna backfire on you, and Meek is going to have a similar experience very soon. After queen to f8 for some reason, now we have a brilliancy. Knight takes g6, sacrificing the knight. Now after king takes g6, pawn takes f5. Double check, rook and bishop. Now, guys, this is absolutely amazing. The king has to go back this way. If he goes this way, there's going to be a problem because you're going to lose a piece back. King comes to f7 in this position, and Morphy takes once again on e6. Forking the king and the knight, but the king can just take, right? King takes e6, but now, guys, pawn to f5. An absolute pawn storm is happening on the board right now, and Meek is unprepared. After king to e7, simply queen to h4 with check, attacking the queen. After king to e8, pawn to f6, attacking the bishop, and you've only got one square to save it. Personally, I would just give back the material here. And so Meek thinks the same and takes back on f6. After pawn takes f6, now the king is exposed on this file, but it can escape for another day. However, it's very problematic to try and escape now because if you move to here, the pawn comes forward and that comes with check, attacking the rook, winning a rook, and then if queen takes, you also win a queen, and then you win a rook. So it's actually losing. So you don't want to do that. So first, Meek takes on g1 with the rook. Rook takes back on g1, and now knight takes f6. Now all your problems are gone, right? No. Bishop to g6 with check, attacking the king. King comes to d7, and now if you see the king is exposed, the rook is still on the starting square, this bishop is doing absolutely nothing, this knight can only jump into the attack weirdly, and black's pieces are just all over the place while white's pieces are generating an attack for the ages. It's such a powerful attack that 170 years later, I'm talking about it. That's just how crazy it is. Anyways, after bishop to f5 check, once again putting the king in check and forcing him to a compromised square. Now you don't want to be going to this square or to this square. The reason being is that if you go to this square, you're going to be pinning your knight to the king, and then after rook to g6, there's no way of saving your knight. And if you go to this square, it's the same idea because after king comes to c7, bishop check, and now the king has no squares. Unless you give up this knight check, and your king is still forced either to here or to here, and you don't want to give up a knight for no reason. So you're still going to lose a knight either way. At this point, black plays king to e8, and king to e8 is followed up by a very simple move, bishop takes h6. Bishop takes h6, attacking the queen. Queen to h8. Once again, Meek is in a compromised position. And after rook to g7, it was at this point that Meek resigned the game, and it's for very good reason. Here's a possible continuation if following basic chess principles and also the best moves recommended by the engine. After knight to g8, trying to defend this checkmate twice. Obviously, you can't save this bishop effectively, and maybe removing one of the attackers with knight takes h6. Simply bishop to d7 check, and the king only has one square, which leads to an eventual checkmate. After queen to f4, now there's only knight blocks, and now this is checkmate. This is one of the lines. There are many others, but they all end up the same way. Meek saw this and resigned the game. So that was the Cock and Balls opening, 170 years ago variation. I thought it was quite an interesting game. It highlights the attacking power and the defensive power of a good cock and balls. But back then, I suppose they didn't value your second ball. One was just about enough. So we didn't get to see the second ball. But perhaps if you know of any other famous chess players who have played the cock and balls in the past, do drop a comment with the game below, and I'll check it out, potentially give it a review, and see how they fared with it. Either way, be sure to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.